Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. It was the month of Rabi'ul Awwal, in the 5th year after Hijrah. 6 months had passed since the previous battle of Badr al-Sughra, and things in Medina had quietened down a bit. So the Muslims began traveling more freely in the lands, as the Islamic State had grown quite large over the last 5 years, and the talk of the Muslims spread far and wide. It was in this state that a rider came to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to say that in a place known as Doomatul Jandal, the Ghassani tribes had been raiding any caravan which passed through that area, and they were busy gathering in their numbers, planning to attack Medina and raid its caravans. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam put Hazrat Siba' ibn Urfatah radiyallahu anhu in charge of Medina and raised an army of 1,000 Sahaba radiyallahu anhum to go and confront them. This battle had some specialities about it that hadn't been found in any of the previous battles that the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum had fought. The first thing was that this was the longest duration that a ghazwa had lasted, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum had been gone for an entire month before returning home. The second thing clarifies the first and puts it into context, which is the fact that this battle took place at Doomatul Jandal, which is over 450 kilometers away from Medina. It may as well have been in another country, so far away it was. And the third speciality about this battle was that it was the first time that the Muslims encountered allies of the Romans, because Doomatul Jandal was literally on the border of the lands which the Roman Byzantine Empire controlled, which is why the Muslims could go on to conquer Sham and expel the Romans later on, as the Islamic State was already from this early stage stretching that far. So the Islamic State was growing exponentially, and its enemies were growing too, as the Muslims were now no longer only dealing with just the mushrikeen of Makkah. They also had to deal with the munafiqeen within Medina that masqueraded as Muslims, as well as the Jews who tried to undermine the Muslims through deceitful means. Apart from them, the Muslims also had to deal with the various mushrik tribes of the Hijaz, and now the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum were going to face the Christian Arabs from the Ghassani tribes as well. The Ghassanids were originally from Yemen, but because of their allegiance with the Romans, they moved into the Hijaz to be closer to their allies. The movements and gathering of the Ghassanids had no actual impact on the Muslims, and the Muslims could literally have just ignored them and it would have made no difference to them. But a threat made against the Islamic State was a threat made against the deen of Allah, and that was not something which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took lightly. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam adopted a new strategy for this battle in order to take the kuffar by surprise. So the Muslims traveled at night and concealed themselves by day, so that the news of the Muslims' approach would not be leaked to the kuffar. And so the Muslims traveled in this way to Doomatul Jandal, which is where this battle got its name from. This was such a far distance from Medina that the journey there took 15 days. Picture this for a moment. The Muslims are traveling for half a month straight in an offensive jihad to fight an unknown amount of enemies in a distant unknown land which is wrought with dangers, and where the Muslims could easily be attacked not just by the Ghassanids and the local tribes, but the Roman Empire as well, who were regarded as one of the superpowers of the world at the time they were there too. Yet not a single one of these factors made the slightest difference to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. And so the Muslims marched on. Along the way, about 1 day's distance journey from Doomatul Jandal, the Muslims came across some shepherds of the Ghassanids with their sheep and camels and animals. The Muslims took them by surprise and they began to flee. And the Muslims then gathered up all their animals as war booty and continued further on. As the Muslims collected these animals, the word was spread to the Ghassanids, and so as many as they were, and despite having the home ground advantage, the fact that they had been taken so by surprise and already suffered a loss to the Muslims before arriving on a battlefield with them, it made them abandon any hope of defeating the Muslims in battle. So they dispersed there where they were and fled all in different directions. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had brought along a Sahabi by the name of Hadrat Madhkur radiyallahu anhu. He acted as a guide for the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum through these lands which were unknown to the Muslims at large. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam finally reached Doomatul Jandal, the Muslims found the area totally lifeless. Not a single person was anywhere to be seen. And so the army camp was set up. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam broke the army up into small groups and sent them out all in different directions to see if they can find trace of the army that the kuffar had been gathering. But despite spending a few days at Doomatul Jandal and having sent out scouting parties all over the place, there was still no army to be found. Some of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum returned to the camp, bringing along with them some more camels that they had found along the way. And it was only Hazrat Muhammad ibn Maslama radiyallahu anhu that had captured a man. And this man was brought to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked this man about the remainder of the army. So the man replied that the army had fled already after hearing that their animals had been taken. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then invited this man to Islam, and he accepted, becoming one of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. Then the Muslims began the long journey back home to Medina, not having physically fought a battle, but yet returning home with a victory and a lot of animals as fay, having dispersed the kuffar and stamping down the authority of the Islamic State over yet another expanse of land. And in this manner, the Ghazwa to Doomatul Jandal came to an end. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.